Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rochalina.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast is brought to you by Holland, Harnham Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland, Harnham Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. I'm joined today by Louise Coles. Louise is the CEO of Creative Youth, a not-for-profit charity which aims to enable young people to realise their potential through the arts. What's unique about Louise is how she found her way into the arts during university and how she's transforming the International Youth Arts Festival into a formidable force in showcasing the next generation of talented artists at a local, national and international level. And be sure to listen to the end, where Louise shares with us what we can expect from the festival this year through its DigiFest event. So whether you're interested in knowing more about Creative Youth or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful local charity, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. Welcome, Louise Coles, to the Inside Kingston Podcast. Louise, I'm really excited about this conversation because I really like the work that your organisation does in enabling young people to realise their potential through the arts. And I think that our listeners can learn a lot from this chat, especially about the cultural initiatives that you guys promote here in our local area. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So, Louise, where did you grow up?
Where did I grow up? Australia, actually.
Oh, wow.
Perth, Australia. I'm British by birth, but my parents immigrated to Australia when I was 18 months old. So I spent my former childhood there and then came back when I was almost a teenager in my sort of latter school years. So very interesting upbringing, really grateful for it. And it's kind of has contributed, I think, to, what I've done today, which I can talk more about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, coincidentally, I spent a bit of my childhood in Brisbane, so there we go, kindred spirits.
Ah, fabulous. Well, I still have residency ties there, and it's and I go over quite a lot. So there's some, shall we say, some connections that are brewing at the moment with regards to our work with Creative Youth as well.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And Louise, did you go to university? And if so, what did you study?
Yeah, I did. So England, I went to what was the Polytechnic of North London back then in 1983. I studied history and classics, strangely enough.
All right.
I had this kind of aspiration that I might become a teacher. And history's always been my sort of subject, But maybe just if you want me to elaborate now, throughout my 3 years in London, based in London, it was a fabulous course, but I spent most of my time, I should say, on extracurricular activities. And one of the key things was I got very involved with the Polytechnic's Theatre Playhouse, P&L it was called, and it also had a lot of links with theatre in the community in London. So I started doing a lot of work supporting that and putting on plays. And then by the end of my 3 years, I was sort of managing it. And I'd found a kind of niche for myself and an interest and passion. And I think I learned what my skills were fast becoming. And that's sort of what's led me into my career today. So, it was an interesting time. I absolutely love living in London and soaking up that, it was interesting times, 1983 to 1986. But very fortunate to, that how my sort of current career has evolved.
That's fantastic. And Louise, am I right in saying you were the first employee at the Rose Theatre Kingston?
I was the first employee for the Kingston Theatre Trust.
Gotcha.
I think there was, because it all sort of came out of the RBK. There was an initial employee, which is a council employee that did some sort of, work right in the early days. But then, yes, I was the first official employee of the Kingston Theatre Trust, which of course has now become the Rose. And I was employed and I stayed for 4 years to work as a campaign administrator, which was a very multitask, role, but primarily focused on raising money for getting the building out of the ground, the capital side of it, and trying to engage the community and developing the Friends of the Rose, which is what I did. Really, I was exactly that. And it's interesting to have come back to Kingston now doing this job, because I've been away for a while,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for the benefit of our listeners who perhaps are not familiar with the Creative Youth Charity, could you give us a summary of what it's all about?
Yes, the Creative Youth is a Kingston-based charity which was formed about 12 years ago. And really, it was about enabling all the young people, and I won't use all, age 5 to 26, to kind of be able to access the arts and culture, showcase their talents, and support their kind of life and careers through skills development and, boosting their confidence and self-esteem. It's a local charity, but embedded in the local community very much with projects we do, but it also has this wide international remit, and making those connections, which I think, in light of everything that's going on in the world today, has become more important than ever, that our young people are engaging in a global context. And I think we bring that to the table. Yeah.
And I love the work you guys do on that front. What is it in your view about the arts that is one form of enabling young people to really realize their potential?
I think it's for me, it's around the collaborative team thing that is usually part of an arts project, and the sort of arts mindset, and I think, any young person, whether they're confident or whether they have self-esteem, low self-esteem or whatever, I think it's a really good vehicle and tool for that, enables them to sort of, if you like, come out of their shell and be able to just grow into, an adult. And I think and predominantly, so it does a number of things, but for me, and I'm thinking back to my own personal experiences, it's certainly what it did to me, in the very early days, because I probably bypassed that. I, started out doing ballet and in Australia. And then when I went to school in England, I was involved with a theatre group. So for me, it was all around that camaraderie about, enabling and growing something together, and how we work together to fulfill a potential, not our own potential, but as a team. And I think the arts, by nature of what it does that, and it's just a fabulous vehicle and tool that enables those sorts of things. It's kind of the key thing. I mean, I'm sure there are many other reasons I could go on to, but I think that's the key thing for me.
And with regards to some of the projects that the Creative Youth Charity supports and promotes in the area, could you give us a flavour of what they look like?
Yeah, so Creative Youth is obviously the umbrella organisation, and for a number of different programmes and projects that we put on throughout the year. I mean, obviously the key event each year is the International Youth Arts Festival every July, which unfortunately this year we have had to cancel. It's normally a 10-day event that takes part in various venues around in the borough, including the Rose and Kingston College, and other sites, and we do a sort of Market Square activity. And that's the key event. But I would also say that Creative Youth is obviously much more than that. We do have other projects, for example, something called the Creative Talent Programme, which is well supported by the Arts Council, and that's directly supports and gives money to emerging artists and companies that are sort of at the start of their careers, to help them into the industry, and that's sort of a year-round support through mentoring and professional development and workshops and so forth. And then other projects throughout the year, quite bespoke and maybe, are according to what may come up in tandem working with local partners. We have, for example, done some Heritage Lottery funded projects over the years, and revolving around music in Kingston, its history, and something called Records, People and Music before my time. It was quite an amazing project that young people got involved with. And there's actually a link on our website if people want to see what all that was about. And there's an educational toolkit, actually, that young people can access to find out more about Kingston's rich music history.
It's a phenomenal project.
Absolutely.
In preparation for this interview, I was going through it, and I think I remember seeing some of it a few years ago, and I had no idea about the history of Decca in New Malden and the bands that it signed and that played there. I just had no idea of that. It's absolutely amazing. If you're a music fan, I definitely urge you to go onto the Creative Youth Charities website and have a look at that project. It's awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, the educational toolkit's good for young people, teachers, but for anyone. And I think just to add to that, we are intending on submitting a new bid to the Heritage Lottery Foundation to sort of, shall we say, grow and expand on that project and that legacy and develop it further. So we hope that might be successful. And I think it's quite key because when I was living and working in London, not in Kingston at the time, I do remember quite clearly the Kingston Polytechnic and the music scene that was going on down here. And I did used to frequent the borough even before I moved down and worked at the Rose Theatre. You know, it did have that... everyone knew it for its music scene, shall we say, certainly students, at that time. So there's a lot of circles going on here for me personally. But I think it's absolutely amazing, that music tradition and history. So those are the sorts of, if you like, bespoke and one-off projects that we, will develop according to what need and what partners out there might also want us to get involved with.
Yeah.
So we intend to do more of that. Yeah.
Really cool. So look, you mentioned the International Youth Arts Festival, of course, being the flagship festival for you guys. And I understand that this year it will be an online event due to the coronavirus pandemic. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what we can expect from it this year?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, we went into lockdown. Well, we cancelled the festival literally about a week before the official lockdown happened. Mm-hmm. We were at the point of, a lot of international companies and artists needing to book their travel and so forth. And, obviously we knew that was going to become an issue. So we decided to cancel, first time in 12 years. We went, like most people, went into a period of licking our wounds and, what were we going to do? But then the team, I should say, more than me, rose to the challenge, and our festival director, Petra Jane Tauscher, she decided, we would put together a digital online festival. So we've entitled it DigiFest, which is taking place the 3rd to the 5th of July. And it will encompass a number of those companies and artists that were going to come and, present their work physically, but have now decided, that they're submitting work on an online fashion. Obviously, some of it has had to change to fit different formats, and it will vary what that is. But there's an exciting piece of work by the Kenyan Youth Theatre, for example, and I believe they're collaborating with the National Youth Music Theatre this end. So that's something that's come about a bit organically. So there's going to be a number of different companies, artists presenting their work. But also, for me, really exciting thing we're able to do online this year is develop our project called So Do You Want to Work in the Arts? The last 2 years of our festival, we sort of piloted a little project with that title, which is really about workshops and panel discussions for those that might be interested in entering the arts, and even those just generally interested. And it would involve all sorts of workshops on various subjects, maybe practical things like how to fundraise, how to develop your business, but also more holistic, and conversations that are topical for young people working in the arts and even just sitting outside the arts. So we've got a really exciting and more developed program online, which actually suits an online format in many ways better. Because I think we're also going to have a discussion around diversity and the whole Black Lives Matters debates and issues that are going on, and another one on mental and well-being for young people. So I think we've got basically young people running these panel sessions as well. Wow. So this, I think it's they're going to be some really interesting content in there. And this DigiFest, when we come back out to play with the International Youth Arts Festival in its hopefully, business as usual way, we still intend on, developing, enhancing DigiFest further, because it has huge international reach as well. So we're quite excited about being able to, if you like, pilot that further this year in this way.
And I love the idea that maybe people who couldn't have access to come to Kingston in this country or abroad would still be able to find the collection of content and work that you guys put together digitally. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's a learning curve for us because we've always needed, I think, to get a bit better at our digital platforms and what we use and the work we do around that area. And it's partly due to knowledge, but also, needing resource. The arts maybe in some ways in general are a bit behind with these things. So it's a good opportunity for us to learn about how we do digital work, and we have had a grant from the Arts Council, emergency funding. And I have to say, without the Arts Council's emergency funding and without the Royal Borough of Kingston's support, we may be in a tricky situation like so many other arts organisations. But it's fabulous that we're still here. We're enabling to do DigiFest, and then we have, just briefly, if I want to touch on it, some other potential activity at the end of September. If we're allowed to come outside and do an outdoor event, we hope to do that in September, beginning of October, to pick up on some of the work we've done in festival and the market stage and what have you. So it's a bit of watch this space, really. It's all of us are doing at the moment. Yeah.
What are some of the key business lessons you've learned throughout your life?
From a personal lesson, I think I knew I wanted to go into a sort of management type leadership role quite early on, and sort of worked my career towards that. But I think, like many people in those situations, you think that leadership or management is, bossing people around, shall we say, and I was always, I guess, in some ways quite good at asserting my authority in that way, which is, looking back on it, is not, particularly a nice way to behave. But I think I learned quite quickly that's definitely not the way to get the best out of people, that management isn't around being a boss per se. Yeah. And it was, more around motivating the team and making sure that they have ownership of what you are doing. And, that's something, I have to, even to this day, I have to kind of check in with myself to go, am I making sure I'm doing that to give the team ownership to, and are they having the most fun in a way out of it? Because I think one of the key things to me as well is around in the arts particularly, and when I started out, we had a lot of fun and joy with what we're doing, but because the way things develop, there's a lot of bureaucracy and form fillings and stresses around finances and filling in this and that, and the paperwork and the health and safety stuff, which is all necessary, some of it necessary. But by the same token, I think some of us have lost that joy that we had, or fun we've had at, work, creating art and what have you. And for me, it's about making sure that we still do that. Because I think if your team, this isn't just an art, but this is business in general, I think if people are enjoying what they're doing, then they then are going to create the best work and have the best time, and you'll retain staff and all that sort of thing. So I think that's sort of absolutely key. And as I said earlier, that sort of not trying to micromanage, that what a leadership role is about. I've learned as I've gone along. Nowadays there are many more courses and things, and there are full-time arts administration management courses. There weren't any when I started out, and there was one part-time course that sort of supported you in those ways. So I kind of had to learn as I go along and through my peers, about what was working and what was not, by default. But I think that's a really key, it's a mistake, but something, this sort of micromanaging thing that you can still tend to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I read once that the art of leadership is not to lead others, but to turn others into leaders. And I think that's a great way of thinking about it, isn't it? Is to enable people to fulfill their role in the organization. And I'm with you.
Absolutely.
That is super tricky, but a fascinating area to be improving on continuously.
Absolutely. I think as you get older and a bit wiser, inevitably more established in your career as well, you don't feel, shall we say, that you're not, I'm not that I've ever been in competition, because it's, I love the ethos of what we do in the arts, but, you feel like you actually want to give back. And for me, working in a young people's context has been a kind of thread throughout all the companies and artists I've mainly worked for, supporting young people coming up and becoming leaders. And I'm quite proud to say that that's happened. People that I have mentored and whatever, they have become leaders in the industry, and in many ways running bigger organisations now than I am, So that's fabulous.
That's great. When you look back at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
A number of things. I think I'm proud of, well, I'm obviously proud of the Rose's development over the years. I was there in the initial days, setting up the Friends, which very quickly grew from a group of 60 to about 1,000 people in a couple of years. And I know that Friends volunteer force is still in operation today. But I'm really proud, and it's obviously that lots of people after I've left that have enabled it to continue and be a success story. But I am proud of my sort of early contributions at that time, which was a tricky time, trying to find money and what have you. But I think I'm also proud, I have to say, of one young people's theatre company that I co-founded with some other people, and I did all the sort of paperwork and set it up. And it's still going to this day. This was 1988. I became its first administrator, manager. Then I went on the board for a while after I'd left its administration. Then I'd left the board, and I remember recommending peers to go on the board. And then recently, and probably the first time I actually made some money was when they invited me back to work on a new business plan for them. This was a year or so ago. So I'm really proud that this company called Chasm, I should have said, or Chasm as they call themselves now, have still been going to this day. And the work that they are doing in predominantly the east of London is around supporting disadvantaged young people. And they do projects with like young refugees and those from sort of disadvantaged backgrounds. So, it has evolved from a sort of early theatre company to much more of a social, entity. And really proud they're still going. Really proud I've still had involvement. And and that's just fabulous. And we still, and I hope to have them in the festival at some point. So
absolutely. Oh, that sounds lovely. What next for you and your organisation? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
Well, I think I just touched on the Heritage Lottery funding. All being well, if we get funding, we want to do that. I just developed, without getting too boring, I have developed a 4 or 5 year business plan. I want this organisation to be what I call more strategic now. We are starting to evolve into having more of a industry presence, and our profile is definitely going up in the arts industry around the UK and internationally, I think, more than ever. It doesn't detract from the local work that we're doing, which is absolutely key. But I think we're working on our programs like the Creative Talent Programme I mentioned earlier, being quite strategic so that the companies and artists we support with that year of funding or whatever, they then are able to showcase their work in the festival. They then, for example, may come out of that and we're facilitating them being able to take their work overseas. So they're creating a business, we're helping them with the creating of their business. So those sorts of initiatives. And I've also, for example, developed trying to find 3 European partners. I've got 2 at the moment, Norway, a similar organisation in Norway and one in Bucharest, Romania, who I want to do strategic work with so that, for example, we can send those companies to those countries, and or they send us their artists and companies to our festival. So we're going to sort of, work and develop those kinds of aspects, I think. And develop, I think once a year we'd like to develop a sort of local project, and in collaboration with the local partner or business or whatever. We've got strong connections, as you probably know, with Kingston University and Kingston College. We do have a lot of offers for work experience and volunteers, young people, to come into the office, and literally the door is open literally throughout the festival and throughout the year to come and learn and take part in things. So that for me is a really important strand of what we're doing as well, which we will develop.
Awesome.
So a number of things on the go, and but we've got a clear mission now for the next priorities for the next 4 or 5 years. Yeah,
exciting times ahead.
Yeah, no, really excited. And I want to, obviously we have financial challenges each year. So, maybe a little plug here for any businesses or anybody listening. My email box is open. We number of ways we can sponsor or support what's going on out there as well. But we don't have any regular public subsidy. We do get some funding from the council, and the university are strong supporters, but we have to raise substantial amounts of money each year to continue. So I'm probably just going to do a little plug there, if that's all right.
That's absolutely fine. And I second that, because I've been a beneficiary of the arts projects that you guys bring to Kingston. I've introduced my daughter to the theatre via one of the projects that you guys put on in Kingston. So definitely second that.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's no denying what we do to support the local economy, and a happy borough, is going to, and, young people's sort of happiness within that is just key. And trying to sort of retain talent within the borough, is a key kind of area that I think we, are focused on. We want to sort of, rather than someone who decides to go into the arts, then, moving from Kingston, we want to try and retain their potential, so that they're, giving back. So, I think that's the music project's key on to that as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Louise, as we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So what do you do to relax outside of the office?
Oh, I'm a dog walker /walker, big time, and I like my travelling. So those are the two big key areas. That's all I have time to do. And I mean, obviously I go, I do frequent the arts, theatre, music, actually more than theatre, interestingly enough. So a big music goer. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And are there any books that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Well, interesting you should ask that. See, I'm not a prolific fictional reader. I like to read historical and travel guides and documentaries and things. So I'm sort of working my way through the Lonely Planet's Korea travel guide at the moment. Mm-hmm. And maybe that leads on to, me talking a bit about some films and TV things that I've kind of been into. I think, putting into context, I lived in New Malden for the 4 years I was doing the work on the Rose. I lived in New Malden, and I kind of got very interested in the Korean culture. Mm-hmm. And it sort of stemmed from that, and I have been ever since. And lately it's sort of resurfaced through all sorts of reasons. So, for example, one of my favourite the last film I saw was The Parasite, which I think, everyone should watch. It's an absolutely amazing film. And a documentary on Korea, which is a BBC4 documentary called Korea, The Never-Ending Story, which is really fascinating about how the North and South divide has happened. And I think, it's absolutely, everyone should watch that, because I think it's really, really important. And with what's going on currently in the situation, to know the sort of background to that. So I think those are sort of, so the book, Korea, I'm wading my way through I was intending on going to Korea in September to visit a performing arts festival, because we have some Korean companies that do come over and do work for us. But obviously that's all changed now, and I'd started wading my way through a Korea travel guide. So I haven't got any fictional books, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, and since you did mention your love for music, can I pick your brains and ask you for a sort of a recent artist or band that you have heard that you'd recommend our listeners listen to?
Oh, well, I mean, Queen and Adam Lambert. The last thing I saw was Queen and Adam Lambert in Perth, Australia, in February. Their latest tour, and obviously that's all just got cancelled. So I was lucky that I saw them. So I'm hugely fond of the singer called Adam Lambert.
Yeah, he's a very powerful singer. Very powerful.
Yeah, right from the start of his career, I've been a huge fan, and I think his singing ability is just amazing, and his story is amazing, and his fight for LGBT stuff within the industry is amazing. I haven't seen any recent. Well, obviously, it's probably 3.5 months. I was due to see Adam Lambert at Wembley Arena in the beginning of September. That's probably going to be cancelled. So I would say I've just mentioned that for the moment.
That's a good one.
Oh, and I did see, of course, I saw her at the Rose, Stormzy.
Yes.
I don't know if you were able to go, Mia, but...
I wasn't able to go, no, but I know he's a local resident, so Stormzy, if you're listening, we would love to have you on the show.
Yeah, definitely. And I know he's sort of keen on supporting young people, so please make that link happen. I went to see him showcasing his new album, at the Rose, and it was really a fabulous venue for that to take place in. So
absolutely, I only heard great reviews from that. So that sounds really, really good.
Yeah.
Finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your organisation?
Okay, well, obviously our website, www.creativeyouthcharity.org. is the key one. You will find we have a separate website for the International Youth Arts Festival, but it's www.if.org, but you will get a link to that through the Creative Youth website. We are on social media, the usual social media channels. You should find those hashtags and whatever on the website as well.
For the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure I add these resources to the show notes.
Marvellous. Thank you.
Louise, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
Thank you for having me. And check out what we do, everybody. And hope to see you at a show online in the not too distant future.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Amir.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.